Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how we designed our Santa Please Stop Here sign using VCarve Pro. Okay, so as part of this design, I went online and I found a really good designer on Etsy that designed a great shape of a Santa sleigh. Okay, so that's this one here. So we're going to take this file. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reorientate it and I'm going to turn it 270 degrees. So now that's going to sit nice and straight across our 8 by 4 stock. So I'm going to just center this to the stock very quickly. And I am going to change the size. So if you look over here, you've got select object size. So across this y-axis, I'm going to make this 2,400 millimeters. And because I've got the X and Y linked using this button here, it's already calculated our x-axis at 1,050 millimeters thereabouts. So that's really fitting nicely on our sheet now. And that's also centered this design to our sheet. Now, what I'm going to do firstly is I'm going to take this outside vector and I'm going to hold control on my keypad and I'm going to press C, followed by pressing V. And what that's done is it's copied and pasted an exact carbon copy of that vector right over the top of our design. So I'm going to come over to the drawing buttons and I'm going to draw a straight line. Now, this symbol here shows me that my new line is going to be directly touching the edge of this vector. And as I come down to here, I'm going to hover over this one, get that same icon to show. Now, straight away, the drawing icon is going to try and ask me to draw another line. But if I just press the space bar, it stops that. So now what I've got two sleigh outlines and this separate line in there. Sorry, if I click one of these outline vectors and I click our new line, I'm going to move these away from the main design just so I can work on it without disturbing anything. So very simply, I'm going to take my smart snipping scissors and I'm going to cut that away. What you've got now is the remainder of this boundary, which is going to sit over the top of our design as an overlay piece. Okay, so now I've got my separate boundary here. I'm just going to highlight that one and I'm going to come over to the offset boundaries function and I want to create a new vector inside. And I'm also going to leave it so it creates some sharp offset corners and I'll come in by 50 millimeters. And when I press that, you'll notice it's popped us a new vector inside here. So I'm going to take this one away. I'm going to delete that. And what I'm left with here is this inside boundary and this outside boundary. So for point of reference, if I just highlight both of those vectors and press G on the keypad, I can drag those and I can drop those straight over the top of our design and it will show you what space we've got to work with then. Okay. So that's going to be our overlay piece that's laminated on top of our design. Right, okay, so I've been online and I found a license-free image of Santa's face, which I quite like the look of. This is going to VCarve really nicely. So quite simply, we've got ourselves a bitmap image that we brought into VCarve Pro. And I'm going to select the trace bitmap option. And at the moment, I'm quite happy to just knock off the tightness a little bit. And we'll leave the noise filter very low because if you look at this, it's a fairly clean image. So if I just press the preview button, you can see now our new created boundaries are linked quite nicely to the original bitmap. So we'll just press apply and then we can come up to our layers here and we can switch off the bitmap layer. And that's now just hidden the bitmap away in the background, which we can always bring back again. But for the time being, we'll just switch that off. So now what we've got is our Santa face vector, okay? So we'll close off the bitmap trace and we'll go back to our drawing tools because again, we're gonna mess around with this ever so slightly. So we're gonna try and change Santa by 90-degree increments so he sits quite nicely on our sleigh. And if I bring Santa across to here, we'll notice first things first, he's not sized very well. So we will try something in the region of about 400 millimeters. And that's a much nicer size model now for our project. However, as you can see, poor Santa's facing the wrong way. So we'll just flip him vertically now, which means he'll be facing the right way on our sleigh. Okay. Now the next thing is we're going to add some text down here to ask Santa to kindly stop here. So I'll deselect Santa's face and we'll come over here to the draw text function. And we're going to use an Arial narrow text and all in capitals. Santa, enter. It'd be Santa, stop here, okay? Okay, so now we've got the basis of our text made. Just notice that these letters are quite close together. So to give them some definition, we're going to come over to the Edit Text Spacing and Curves function. And we're going to select our text. And by holding down the Shift key, we're going to click twice between each letter. And that just opens up each of the text just a fraction. Okay, so we'll get that spaced just how we want it. I'll press Escape then, which will get us out of that text spacing function. And again, I'm going to highlight all of this text here now, and I'm going to rotate that by 270 degrees, which will again bring us nice and close then to the orientation of our project. So as you can see now, just by throwing this extra boundary over the top, this extra set of vectors, we could just see how this is all going to work for our spacing. So at this stage, I'm going to open up the Sheets function and I'm going to add a new sheet. So I'm going to take these selected vectors, I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to press X, which is going to cut those away from our surface. I'm going to come over to our second sheet and I'm going to hold Control and press V then to paste this onto our second sheet. So we'll just move this around now so it's orientated a bit better on our second sheet, which will set up all the cuts for that. We'll just come back to our first sheet now. And we're going to open up the toolpaths functions and we're just going to have a look at creating now these toolpaths, okay? So the first toolpath I'd like to create is going to be a profile cut, and we're going to profile cut that on the inside. And by coming down to our shapes, we're going to hold down the left mouse button and drag up and to the left hand side just to select all of those vectors. We're going to cut this with a 3.175 or a 1/8 inch compression cutter. And starting from the top, we're going to cut this 10 millimeters deep, which will allow us then to cut with our compression cutter in one pass. We're going to cut on the inside of our shape. And because we're using a compression cutter, we're not going to use any tabs for that. And we don't need any ramps. We're literally going to press calculate. And it will obviously tell us that by cutting 10 millimeters, we'll be 1 millimeter into our spool board, which is okay. So if I reset the preview, I'll just ask it to cut our previews then. You can see by double clicking on each of those components, that's going to disappear away from our material. Okay. So we'll come back now to our 2D view. We'll deselect this one. We'll select our outside vector, and our second toolpath is going to be cutting on the outside using exactly the same cutter and exactly the same functions. And we're going to press calculate. And again, this is now going to promote this onto our preview for our stock. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to set up a VCarve toolpath. And we're going to highlight all of our vectors then for our VCarve. And we're going to use a 4mm end mill. It's a good quality cutter. We're going to cut 2 millimeters deep into our stock. And then our finishing pass is going to be a 60-degree VCarve cutter. So I'm quite happy with all the parameters selected. So if we run the preview now, you can see we're going to have all of our internals. So I could just cut those away from the project. Okay, and then if I just double click on this outside, you can see then that is our project in the flesh. So that's the sheet 1 done. There's our text for Santa Stop here. There's our VCarve for the Santa face as well. And then there's our internal and our external profile cuts. So if we come over to the summary of toolpaths, that's going to tell us we're somewhere in the region about an hour now to cut the first sheet. Okay, so that's all of our toolpaths created for the first sheet. So very quickly and very briefly, we're going to come over to this second sheet. Now they're grouped. If we press U on the keypad, that will ungroup all of those vectors again. Okay, so to group multiple vectors, you press G on your keypad for grouping. Okay, and then to ungroup those vectors, again, you highlight them all and press U, and that will give you then separate vectors back again. Okay, so to go back to this, so we're going to select our internal vector, and we're going to come over to our profile and toolpath, and we're going to cut inside of the line, again, using our 3.175mm end mill at 10 millimeters deep. And if I press calculate, that will very quickly show us then this internal cut. Okay, then come back, we'll select the outside vector, and we'll create another new toolpath for cutting on the outside only. We'll press calculate, and as you can see, that will be our inside and our outside vectors cut. I'm going to go ahead now and start saving these tool paths. So the only real thing to be aware of, if I come back to the first sheet, when I come to saving my tool paths, I'm going to come and use this option here, which is visible tool paths to one file. And to cut down on machining and setup time, I'm going to select our first profile, which is these internal cuts. And I'm going to select our second tool path, which is the external cuts. And you can see there we've got profile 1 and profile 2 in the tool paths to be saved. And I can select as many as I need to, but you have to be aware that all of those have to be the same cutter. So the second I go and select something which is a different cutter, it comes up with an error. And obviously it takes away my function to be able to save my tool path. So just double checking, I've got profile 1 and profile 2. I can go ahead. Post-processor then is obviously my Yeti SmartBench. And I can go ahead and I can press save tool path and save that off to my folder before using Smart Transfer to pop that file across to the SmartBench. Okay, so that's a video on how we designed our Santa Please Stop Here sign. If you'd like to see how we made it, we made a separate video tutorial linked in the description below. I hope you found this interesting and thank you very much for watching.